Trust in media hits bottom. 60% say sources pay for stories. Yes, there has been an ongoing crisis in media where a lot of organizations have begun pumping out trash. They don't care about fact-checking. They don't care about actually looking at data sets and studies. They just write trash off of social media. They live in a bubble, and it makes everyone go insane. So it's not surprising to me to see that people actually don't trust the media, and they actually think people are paying for stories. I will tell you this right now. It was last week. I was offered all of my travel covered in exchange to go cover a story in the UK. I said, hell no, I won't do that. In fact, in many circumstances, depending on the circumstances, journalists can be really strict, some good ones, about not accepting anything at an event. So let's say you go to an event and they have a buffet table. Me personally, I don't care if after the fact I grab some snacks or whatever. I think that's meaningless. The food's there. It's not like anyone's promising me anything. But some journalists will refuse to touch it. They'll refuse to drink anything there. They will receive nothing and say no way, because the assumption is by giving the journalists food, it's kind of buying favors. I will say, if I go to an event and they have a press room and they give you a bunch of food and drinks, I won't take it. But it really does depend, because if there's a conference and there's an organization, like let's say a conference says we're going to put up drinks and food in the press room, but you're covering individuals at the conference, it's different. So it's really complicated. But let's read through this. Are sources paying for stories? Well, many people think so. Confidence in the media has hit rock bottom, with many news consumers believing that reporters file their reports before knowing the facts. That's true. And 60% are under the impression that sources pay for stories, according to a depressing new survey of American journalism. The Columbia Journalism Review poll also confirmed the pending death of print newspapers and magazines, and a remarkable shift to social and online media as sources of news. Now, here's a really interesting, because all the journalists I know are going to start shrieking at me for saying this. But look at this. We can see here, confidence in institutions. A great deal of confidence in blue, only some confidence in gray, and hardly any confidence at all in red. And what can we see? Well, when it comes to the press, there are more people who have confidence in the press than in Congress. However, more people have hardly any confidence at all in the press than they do Congress. Basically, I think if I could simplify this, more people distrust the press than they do Congress. That's mind-blowing. At the same time, keep in mind, it's the gray area that makes this statistic possible. There are more people who trust the press and more people who distrust the press than Congress. And that's impressive, because Congress is like the worst of the worst. Their approval rating right now, the congressional approval rating, is at 18.9%. 70.3% disapprove of Congress. Wow, that's crazy. I think we got big problems here in this country if that's the case. The survey, done in partnership with Reuters Ipsos, interviewed 4,214 adults and found the media is last on a list of all Washington institutions that the public has confidence in, even under Congress. Oh my God. CJR did not write up a report or analysis beyond an introduction on the trust gap it found. They wrote, "For decades, we've known that Americans don't trust the press. What we haven't known is how people view the makings of journalism, from the use of fact-checkers and anonymous sources to the question of whether money skews journalistic decision-making. This new national poll for CJR answers those questions and points to how big the trust gap remains. Instead of words, it showed the grim news in graphics." Well, I'd like to point something out. Nobody has fact-checkers anymore. I think, the New York Times might, maybe the big newspapers might, but how many stories have been written up in the Washington Post and the New York Times without fact-checking? Many of them. And again, I think the New York Times does have fact-checkers, but you also have that issue where there was that activist woman who, she was a fact-checker for, I think, the New Yorker, and then claimed that a military tattoo was a Nazi tattoo, and this guy started getting all sorts of threats, and she was forced to resign. I call that being fired, but she was forced to resign as a fact checker, because if your fact checker can't fact checks and starts a viral trend attacking someone because they were in the military, you're crazy. And then she went to go work for an activist organization, which I think she got fired from anyway. Well, let's read some of this. In those graphics, it revealed the problem journalism faces some key findings. Press-led institutions for which the public has the lowest confidence. Yep. Of all demographic groups, only Democrats expressed a positive confidence in the press. Yes, because they all have Trump derangement syndrome, and all of these news organizations just pump out anti-Trump news. If they chilled out and just gave a more balanced view on what Trump was doing, you'd have much less trust in the press. Because a lot of Democrats think the media isn't doing a good enough job. They think they're not slamming Trump enough. 40% get their news from TV. 40% get their news from online and social media sources. 6% get their news from newspapers and magazines. Wow, that's you guys are done. Sorry. 60% believe that sources pay reporters. Yes, in some instances they do. I don't think it's that often though. 41% are unlikely to believe stories filled with anonymous sources, and you shouldn't. You absolutely shouldn't. Now, here's the challenge. What happens when BuzzFeed says, our anonymous law enforcement sources told us that Trump explicitly told Cohen to lie? Everyone goes, I don't know about that. No one could corroborate that story. So what does BuzzFeed do? So Mueller's office comes out and says it's wrong, and they say, nope, we're right. Our law enforcement sources who are beneath Mueller know better than he does, which is insane. And then what happens? Cohen testifies and says, no, Trump did not directly tell me to lie. And BuzzFeed doubles down. So the video I did yesterday, they double down. They refuse to just say we were wrong about this. Our sources maybe were off the beat a little bit. We story was no good. Instead, what do? They say, no, we were right. We were right. And then what happens? People are going to say, why would I trust your story with anonymous sources when they were wrong? And you refuse to correct it. This is why I care so little for these organizations. 42% of Democrats believe the media isn't biased. Just 10% of Republicans said the same. And I can give you a really, really easy way to understand how the media is biased. And I always start by saying this. I'm not conservative. But it's very obvious when you see a news organization do something like conservatives are outraged, or so-and-so does X, conservatives are enraged. If when I don't want to use Justice Smollett, but when a big story happened that outrages people on the left, the media will say people are outraged. When a big story happens that outrages conservatives, the media will say conservatives are outraged. And there you can see their framing of how they view conservatives as an other, as not themselves. Now, admittedly, when you look at my videos, often I will be focused on far left and leftist, but I equally will say conservatives do X as well. Right, so the few stories where I've called out specific groups, admittedly the few stories, because and I can explain that too. I'll say the conservatives do X, the far left does this. Very simply, for those that haven't heard me say it for the billionth time, and we'll move over here to the Columbia Journalism Review. Moderate conservatives aren't doing anything. They're just doing normal things like they've always done. It's the far left and moderate Democrats. I don't care about moderate Democrats. You don't see me making videos about Nancy Pelosi. Okay, I make videos about Cortez, who says insane things for insane reasons, and the far left, who also do the same thing. So we have this from CGR, which I'm not going to get into everything because they covered a lot of the important points. But we can see here, I'm going to pull up this graphic, if it works. So we can see confidence in press based on demographics. So Republicans, nearly, what is this, like 65% of Republicans have hardly any confidence at all in what is considered to be the mainstream media. They break down what mainstream media is. We can see that Democrats are 50-50. This is what's important. Democrats are more likely to have confidence in the media, but barely. It's barely greater than chance. And for the most part, they're kind of just neutral. This right here, this gray, is really important. This is called the uninitiated. This is called what Breitbart called the default liberal. People who don't know one way or another. Right? They're in the middle like, I don't know, I have some confidence, I guess, because they don't actively participate that much. The Republicans who watch the news every day and do research are going, what is this? Because it's not just, there's a mix here in this Republican section. The Republicans who do their research and the Republicans who don't. The Republicans who don't sit there being yelled at all day and night and just won't trust the media. The Republicans who do the research don't trust the media. And the same is true for Democrats. These are probably Democrats who are a mix as well. The ones who do the research feel like they're being lied to, and the ones who don't feel like the media is just pandering to the billionaire class or whatever. Interestingly, we can see that Hispanics, blacks, and whites don't trust the media, like just across the board, everybody. So there's confidence in press by more other demographics. We can see, this is interesting too. But I want to show you the mainstream chart. So we can see here that millennials don't trust the press, Gen X doesn't, and boomers don't. Wow, that's weird. So who are the Democrats? Urban are more likely to, suburban are less likely to, and rural absolutely not. But I think this, urban versus rural has a lot to do with party. So this is interesting too. Percentage of respondents who consider the organization mainstream. CBS is the number one. NBC, ABC, CNN, New York Times, WAPO. So it's fairly obvious. Only 66% believe Fox News is the mainstream media, and that's funny because I think they are. But here you go. Vice News, 22%. Sorry, Vice, you're not mainstream. TMZ ranks higher than Vice News in terms of being a mainstream source. Oh, and here's the best part. Rachel Maddow's not much higher, but BillO'Reilly.com is all the way on the bottom. So they say 42% of Democrats believe the media does not have a partisan bias. Only 10% of Republicans believe the same. So, yes, here we go. This is the last one I'm gonna grab because it gets into more complicated stuff. 60% believe that reporters are paid by their sources. They can be, absolutely. That's a huge problem with gaming journalism. But it's not just gaming journalism, it's these niche blogs in general. So if you write specifically about computers, you're going to have a bunch of computer companies wanting to send you free product. If you're a tech journalist, so I know many tech journalists, and this guy I know said tech journalism is the bottom of the barrel in terms of journalism because Samsung will send you a free Galaxy S10 Plus to review, right? And then you get to keep it. So what ends up happening is it's access journalism. This is what's happening in media. It's not just about being paid, it's about in kind. It's about if you want to screen Captain Marvel before everyone else, but you give it a bad review, they won't call you back later. This is the media today. It's trash. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. Stick around. I got more videos coming up at 1 p.m. and then 4 p.m. on my main channel, youtube.com/Timcast. I will see you then.